Prologue. The Stranger in the Shadows. The city never truly slept. Its veins pulsed with neon lights and restless footsteps. Its heartbeat carried in the thrum of distant music, sirens, and the low rumble of late-night traffic. But that night, as the moon carved a silver arc above the high-rises, something older than the city itself crept into its streets. He moved like smoke between alleys, a figure draped in shadows. His coat, tattered, heavy, stained with years of wandering, brushed the wet pavement as though reluctant to carry him further. Beneath it, scars laced his skin like maps of forgotten wars. A predator's scent clung to him, though no human nose could name it. Yet the dogs knew. From corner to corner, their howls rose like alarm bells, throats straining against chains, eyes rolling with primal fear. A single street lamp buzzed above him, casting a harsh white glow. The light flickered twice, then died completely, leaving the block in darkness. He paused, head tilted upward, lips curling into the faintest hint of a smile. Machines faltered in his presence. Electricity bent to the weight of something the modern world had no word for. The few pedestrians nearby quickened their pace, instinct guiding them to avoid eye contact. They did not see the wolf beneath the man, but they felt him. The ripple in the air, the pressure in their lungs, the animal whisper urging run. He carried no luggage, no home, only hunger and a burden older than the skyscrapers towering above him. His amber eyes, glowing faintly under the moonlight, scanned the steel and glass canyons as if he were trespassing in a land not meant for his kind. Every reflection in a shop window showed not just the man, but a shadow with fur and fangs straining to break free. At the edge of the marketplace, a child tugged on her mother's sleeve, pointing at him. "Mama, the wolf." Her voice was innocent, certain. The mother hushed her quickly, dragging her away, refusing to look back. Children always saw more than they should. The stranger did not linger. He had come for one reason, one pull that neither time nor distance could deny. The city would not understand him, nor forgive him. But somewhere in this jungle of lights and glass lived the thread of fate he could no longer escape. As the clock struck midnight, the church bells clanging hollow across empty avenues, he tilted his head to the sky. Clouds thinned just enough to reveal the swollen moon. His lips parted, and for a heartbeat, the sound that escaped him was not human. It was the low, mournful growl of something caged too long. Above, pigeons startled into the air. Below, the sewers hissed as rats fled from unseen vibrations. The city itself seemed to recoil, as though aware a law older than concrete and electricity had just stepped across its threshold. He lowered his gaze again, eyes narrowing, and walked on. The streets stretched before him like a hunting ground, waiting. Somewhere within the noise of engines and heartbeats, destiny stirred, and the city, unaware of what it had welcomed, shuddered as if in warning. Episode 1. The Beautiful Encounter. What happens when something ancient, untamed, and forbidden walks straight into the life of a woman who has only ever known routine? Would you run from danger, or fall helplessly into its arms? Stay with this story, because what begins as a fleeting encounter between a scarred stranger and a lonely woman will unravel into a destiny neither of them can escape. The city was restless that night, as though the streets themselves could sense a storm no weather forecast predicted. Alina Cruz sat by the wide cafe window, her chin resting on her hand, staring at the same corner she stared at every evening after work. The neon sign across the street flickered again. Blue, white, blue, like a heartbeat refusing to settle. Her friends called her beautiful, but beauty meant nothing when your life felt like a locked glass box. Perfect on the outside, suffocating within. Then he walked in. The door creaked open, and with it came a draft colder than it had any right to be. The man's presence was immediate, impossible to ignore. Tall, Broad-shouldered, wrapped in a coat that looked older than the cafe itself, he carried himself like a shadow breaking into the world of light. His eyes, gold, glinting like a predator's under the fluorescent bulbs, skimmed the room before settling briefly on her. Something primal leapt inside Alina's chest. Her breath caught, her pulse betrayed her. She had never seen him before, yet he felt familiar, like a story whispered in dreams she could never quite remember. He ordered nothing. He spoke to no one. He simply stood near the counter, gaze drawn to the glass, watching the city outside as if searching for something, or someone. The air shifted around him. Conversations dimmed. Spoons paused mid-stir. Even the hum of the coffee machine seemed to lower in deference. And then, without meaning to, Alina's eyes locked with his. The connection was immediate. No words, no gestures, just that electric strike of awareness that made the rest of the room vanish. She felt as though he had peeled back her polished surface and glimpsed the secret chambers of her soul. The longing, the boredom, the hunger for more. And in his gaze, she thought she saw the same ache mirrored back. He turned, walked past her table, and for a second, his coat brushed against her chair. The scent that followed was wild, earthy, sharp as pine and iron. She shivered, gripping her coffee cup as though it were the only anchor holding her to reality. Her phone buzzed. A friend's message. "Coming tonight? Drinks at 9? Don't be boring again." She barely read it. Her eyes were already back on him. The man paused at the door, glanced back one last time. A silent invitation, or a warning. Then he stepped out into the night. Alina stood so suddenly her chair scraped against the floor. She didn't know why. Curiosity? Madness? Fate? Whatever it was, it pulled her like a tide. She left her half-full cup behind and followed. The street was colder now, almost unnaturally so. The city's lights blurred, and the sound of traffic felt distant. She spotted him turning into a narrow alley, swallowed by shadows. Her heartbeat thundered. Every rational thought screamed, "Go home." But her feet moved anyway. She entered the alley. Darkness pressed close. The scent of him lingered, thick and intoxicating. Then, movement. A flicker at the far end. She thought she saw his silhouette melt into something larger, something not entirely human. Her breath hitched. "Who are you?" she whispered into the dark. Silence. Then, from the shadows, two glowing amber eyes snapped open. Alina froze. The figure stepped forward, the sound of claws scraping briefly against stone before vanishing again. He was no ordinary man, and she had just stepped into a story that would change her life forever. Episode 2. The Forbidden Child. What happens when a single step into the shadows binds your life to something not human? Would you flee from the truth, or carry its legacy within your very blood? Keep watching, because this is where Alina's ordinary life begins to unravel. A secret bond is sealed in the dark, and what she carries after will mark her forever. The alley was silent except for the pounding of Alina's heart. The glow of those amber eyes burned in the dark, steady, unblinking. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then the shadow shifted forward, and she caught the briefest glimpse. Broad shoulders, sharp jaw, lips curled in something between warning and hunger. Her phone buzzed again, breaking the spell. She gasped, stepping back, but he moved faster, sudden, fluid, impossible. In an instant, he was in front of her, towering, close enough for her to smell the earth and iron on his skin. His hand brushed her wrist, not roughly, but with a deliberate weight that pinned her in place. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low, guttural, as though dragged from somewhere deep. Alina's mouth parted, but no words came. Her instincts screamed danger, yet her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from something sharper, something that terrified her more than claws ever could. Desire. The world tilted. One heartbeat, and the shadows swallowed them both. Weeks blurred into each other after that night. Alina never told anyone what happened, not even herself in the safety of the mirror. She only knew the stranger returned again and again, always in darkness, always at the edges of her world. And though she promised herself to resist, each time his presence broke through the monotony of her life, she surrendered. Then came the change. It started subtly, her sense of smell sharpening, her ears catching whispers of conversations across crowded streets. She dreamt of forests under moonlight, of paws striking the earth in rhythm, of a pack running at her side. And when she woke, she swore she still heard the echoes of howls fading into the morning. Her co-workers noticed first. "You're glowing," one teased. Another whispered, "She's acting strange." But Alina knew before anyone said a word. The test confirmed what her body already screamed. She was pregnant. At night, she lay awake, one hand on her stomach, the other gripping the sheets. Fear warred with wonder. Whispers seemed to rise from the walls, forbidden, unnatural, cursed. Yet beneath it, another voice stirred, chosen. Her cravings unsettled her most. Meat, barely cooked. The metallic tang of blood. Once, in the middle of the night, she found herself standing barefoot in the kitchen, tearing into cold steak with her hands, trembling but unable to stop. And then the nightmares deepened. In them she saw wolves circling her bed, their eyes glowing the same amber as his. Sometimes they bowed to her, other times they bared their teeth, demanding something she didn't understand. The city, too, seemed to notice. Dogs barked whenever she passed. Streetlights flickered again when she drew near. Even strangers glanced at her in unease, muttering as though sensing she carried something not meant for their world. Still, she told no one, not even her mother, not even her closest friend. This child was hers, and his, and though she didn't understand why, she knew she couldn't let anyone take that away. But secrets never stay buried. One evening, as she walked home, hand pressed protectively to her stomach, she felt it. A presence watching. Turning sharply, she caught sight of two men in long coats across the street. Their eyes locked on her with unsettling precision. Not casual glances, not coincidence. They knew. And in that instant, Alina realized her pregnancy wasn't just strange. It was dangerous. Episode 3. Birth of the Wolfborn. The two men in coats didn't move. They only stared. Alina froze on the sidewalk, her hand instinctively wrapping tighter around her stomach as if shielding the life within. One of them whispered to the other, and though the words were drowned by passing traffic, she felt the intent. Cold, invasive, dangerous. She hurried away, her steps quickening until she was nearly running. But even as she turned corners, she knew they would not stop watching her. Something about her condition had marked her, and now unseen forces had taken notice. The months that followed were heavy with fear. Each day her belly grew, so too did the whispers. Neighbors muttered about strange noises at night. A shopkeeper crossed himself whenever she walked by. And still, in her dreams, the wolves circled closer, as though guarding what she carried, or testing if she was strong enough to bear it. The stranger, the werewolf, appeared only in fleeting moments. A silhouette at the end of the street, a shadow that slipped into her room when the world was asleep. He never stayed long, never offered words of comfort. Yet every time she saw him, she felt both dread and safety tangled together. And then, the 9th month came. That night, the city was restless. Clouds tore open to reveal a swollen moon, red as blood, hanging heavy over the skyline. The air thickened with tension, and the streets fell strangely silent. Even the dogs did not bark. Alina's labor struck like a storm. Pain unlike anything she'd imagined tore through her body as the moon's red light streamed through her window. her cries mixed with the strange rhythm of howls rising from the outskirts of the city. Wolves, dozens of them, singing to the night, as if welcoming what was about to enter the world. Hours bled into eternity until, at last, the cry of a newborn pierced the silence. A boy. His skin flushed with the glow of moonlight, his tiny fists clenched tight as though holding on to secrets he was born knowing. Alina, drenched in sweat and tears, whispered the name that came unbidden to her lips. Kyle. For a fleeting moment, the werewolf stood in the corner of the room, watching. His eyes burned with pride, sorrow, and something else. Finality. He stepped forward once, almost reaching for the child, but then stopped. With a low growl, mournful and resolute, he vanished into the shadows, leaving only the echo of his presence behind. Alina clutched her son close. Fear and love warred inside her. But love won. Whatever he was, whatever the world believed, Kale was hers. Outside the window, the blood moon still blazed, and far below on the street, the two men in coats stood once again. Only this time, they weren't watching her. They were looking directly up at the window where Kale lay crying in her arms. Episode 4. Signs of Power. The blood moon waned, but its shadow lingered. Alina pressed Kale against her chest, trembling as she peered out the window. The two men in coats stood unmoving, their faces hidden beneath the street lamp's glow. She blinked once, and they were gone. For weeks after, she lived on edge. Every creak of the floorboards, every stranger's glance felt like a threat. But time moved forward, and Kale grew. Against fear, against whispers, against loneliness, he grew. By the time he was 5, his difference could no longer be ignored. It started small. A cut on his knee healed before Alina could fetch a bandage. Scratches vanished in minutes. His fevers burned hot, but ended within hours, leaving him stronger than before. At night, when the moon rose, his eyes sometimes glowed faintly, golden as the strangers once had. Alina tried to convince herself it was imagination, but she knew better. And Kale was not only stronger, he was connected. The stray cats in their neighborhood followed him everywhere, weaving between his legs as though he were one of them. Birds landed on windowsills when he laughed. Even the fiercest dogs grew calm at his touch. Once, Alina found him standing barefoot in the yard, hand outstretched, as a hawk perched on his wrist like a trained companion. The neighbors began whispering again. That boy isn't normal. There's something in his blood. Mothers tugged their children away from him. But Kale was too young to care. To him, the world was simply alive, speaking in ways others couldn't hear. One night, when he was 7, Alina awoke to the sound of laughter. She rushed to his room and froze. Kale sat on the floor in the pale glow of the moon, surrounded by 3 stray dogs. They weren't snarling or restless. They were lying down peacefully, heads bowed as though they were his guardians. His eyes shimmered gold in the dark, brighter than ever before. "Mom," he said innocently, "they came because I called." Alina's heart clenched. Fear gripped her, but so did awe. She remembered the glowing eyes of the man who had vanished from their lives. Kyle was his son, Wolfborn, bound by the blood moon. Still, danger was never far. Sometimes, when she walked him to school, she spotted shadows watching from across the street. The men in coats, or others like them, had not forgotten, and the city itself seemed to shift when Kale was near. Streetlights flickered as he passed, radios crackled with static. Dogs howled in unison from blocks away. The balance of things was changing, and Alina knew it was only a matter of time before the world demanded to claim what she was trying so desperately to protect. One evening, as Kale played alone in the yard, Alina heard a noise, a deliberate crunch of boots against gravel. She rushed outside, but it was too late. A man in a long coat stood by the gate, eyes fixed on her son. Kale turned, his golden gaze locking with the stranger's, and for the first time, Alina saw fear flicker in the man's eyes. Episode 5. The Awakening. The man at the gate froze under Kale's golden stare. For a heartbeat, the world was silent. Then, without a word, the stranger stepped back into the shadows and was gone. Alina clutched her son, trembling, but Kale only asked, "Why was he afraid of me, Mama?" She had no answer, only fear. Years passed, and Kale grew tall and strong, his features sharpening into a haunting reflection of the father he'd never known. By 16, he was no longer just different. He was extraordinary. His wounds healed before his blood even dried. His senses stretched farther than any human's, hearing whispers from across streets, smelling storms before clouds formed. And at night, when the moon climbed high, his eyes burned with an intensity that unsettled even Alina. She tried to hide him, to keep his world small, but the city had already marked him. The men in coats returned, not just 2 this time, but many. Alina noticed them on street corners, watching their house from parked cars. Others weren't human at all. Kyle began to sense them before they appeared, things moving too silently, eyes that gleamed unnaturally in the dark. Some wore human skin, others lurked in places shadows clung unnaturally long. One night, he confronted Alina, his voice steady, though his eyes stormed with questions. "I need to know, Mama. What am I?" She tried to deny, to protect, but her son had already begun awakening to his truth. The dreams that plagued her during pregnancy now plagued him. Forests drenched in moonlight, packs of wolves bowing to him, hunters wielding silver blades in pursuit. And always, the same presence, his father, watching from the edge of the dream but never stepping closer. Then the city itself seemed to break. Rival forces gathered, unseen by ordinary eyes but blazing bright to Kale's sharpened senses. Packs of wolves howled at the edge of highways. Dark figures moved through alleys, bearing weapons that gleamed with runes. Something vast was converging, and Kale stood at the center of it. The moment of awakening came on the night of his 16th birthday. The moon rose full, fat and silver, hanging over the city like an eye. Kyle wandered to the yard, restless, the night thick with anticipation. Suddenly, every stray dog in the neighborhood emerged from the darkness and circled him, silent, waiting. The air grew electric. The earth itself seemed to hum. His chest tightened, breath quickening. He dropped to his knees, clutching the ground as heat burned through his veins. His hands trembled, nails lengthening into claws, muscles tightening as if remembering a shape his body had never known. His eyes blazed gold, brighter than ever, illuminating the night. In that moment, Kale understood. He was not merely a boy touched by something wild. He was heir to a bloodline older than the city itself, born not only of wolf and human, but destined to defend the hunted, the werewolves who had been stalked for centuries. The dogs bowed low, whimpering in reverence. The night belonged to him. Inside, Alina clutched the edge of the window, tears streaming. She saw the boy she loved being consumed by something vast, something that would take him beyond her reach. A sudden hiss split the silence. Across the street, figures emerged, men in coats, their weapons gleaming silver under the moon. But this time, they were not alone. Behind them moved others, creatures with eyes like fire, not hunters but something darker. Rival forces had come, and all of them wanted Kale. And as the first blade caught the moonlight, Kale stood tall, his voice rumbling with a power that wasn't entirely his own. "Come then, if it's me you want." Episode 6. The Defender Rises. The night trembled with silence. Across the street, the hunters drew their silver blades, their eyes locked on Kale with merciless precision. Behind them, the other figures advanced, creatures cloaked in smoke, their eyes burning crimson like embers pulled from hell itself. Kale's heart thundered. His instinct screamed to fight, yet his human mind whispered caution. The dogs circled him tighter, growling low, awaiting his command. He felt the weight of two worlds pressing on him, human son, wolf heir. He was both, and tonight he would be forced to choose. One of the hunters stepped forward, voice cold as steel. "Wolfborn, you carry the curse of your father. Surrender now, and your mother will be spared." Alina gasped from the doorway. "Kale, don't listen." But before Kale could speak, the crimson-eyed creatures hissed, their voices slithering through the air. "He is ours. The blood moon marked him. His power belongs to the shadows." The hunters turned their blades toward them. Rival forces clashed with words, each claiming Kale as their prize. But Kale's blood boiled. Something deep inside him stirred. Fury, fire, instinct. He raised his head, his golden eyes igniting like twin flames. "No," he growled, his voice carrying an unnatural echo. "I belong to no one." The world erupted. The hunters charged, silver flashing. The crimson-eyed creatures lunged, claws raking the air. Kyle's body moved before thought could catch it. His claws burst forth, his muscles snapping with power, his senses alive with the rhythm of battle. He struck a hunter aside with bone-crushing force, dodged the swipe of a shadow beast, and unleashed a roar that shook the night. The dogs fought at his side, tearing into the attackers, loyal to their alpha. Alina screamed his name, but Kale was already lost to the storm inside him, half boy, half beast, fully awakened. The hunters shouted, "He's stronger than his father!" Fear rippled through their ranks, but determination hardened their blades. Kale fought fiercely, but he was still just one. Silver sliced his arm, burning with unnatural fire. He staggered, gasping, when suddenly the earth itself seemed to tremble. From the far end of the street, wolves emerged, dozens, their eyes gleaming under the moon. They formed a wall between Kale and his enemies, growls harmonizing into a deadly chorus. At their head stood a massive gray wolf, scarred, ancient, unmistakable. Alina's breath caught. It was him, the werewolf who had vanished the night Kale was born, his father. The hunters faltered. The shadow creatures hissed in fury. Kale stood torn between awe and rage. His father had returned, but not for him, for the fight. The gray wolf's voice thundered not in sound, but in Kale's mind. "Choose, my son, human or wolf, heart or blood. You cannot be both, unless you are strong enough to be more." Kale looked at his mother, trembling yet unbroken in the doorway, and then at the wolves who waited for his command. He felt the pull of both sides. He was not just one, he was both, and that made him dangerous. He clenched his fists, blood dripping from the silver wound, and raised his voice over the chaos. "I will fight for both, for humans, for wolves, for my family." The wolves howled in unison, answering his claim. Even the hunters hesitated, their eyes narrowing in grim recognition. The defender had risen. Before the clash could resume, a chilling horn sounded from the rooftops, echoing through the city. Every enemy froze. The crimson-eyed creatures bowed their heads. Even the wolves stiffened. A new presence stepped from the shadows, taller, darker, cloaked in black fire. Its voice cut through the night. "The boy is mine," and Kale realized the true war had only just begun. Epilogue. Legacy of the Wolfborn. The city was never silent anymore. Beneath the hum of traffic, beneath the laughter and shouts of daily life, there was a deeper rhythm now. Pads of paws on rooftops, the whisper of claws against stone, the breath of wolves watching from the shadows. Humans went about their lives unaware, but those who listened closely knew the truth. The city no longer belonged to humans alone. Kyle stood on the roof of an abandoned high-rise, the moon painting silver fire across his skin. At his side, a great wolf rested, scarred and noble, his father. Below, the streets pulsed with life. He could hear every sound, every heartbeat, as though the city itself spoke to him. Once, he had felt torn between two worlds. Now he understood. He was both, and because of that, he could protect them all. In the months since the great battle, things had changed. The hunters had scattered, retreating to the edges of the world to lick their wounds. The shadow-born creatures had not returned. Not yet. But Cale knew they would. Darkness did not vanish. It waited. For now, peace held. Werewolves who had once lived in hiding had begun to step into the open, tentatively, testing the edges of a world that had long feared them. They gathered in secret places, forming clans under the Defender's banner. Some came from forests, others from distant cities, all drawn to the Wolfborn boy whose howl had turned the tide. Cale bore the weight of their hope. He was their shield, their voice, their symbol. Yet he was also Alina's son, still returning home to a warm meal, still laughing with her in rare moments of quiet. She reminded him that strength without compassion was no victory at all. He had promised to honor both sides of himself, and he kept that promise daily. But whispers carried through the city's veins. Hunters were regrouping. New enemies plotted in silence. Even among wolves, not all were loyal. Cale's father warned him often, to lead is not only to protect, but to be challenged. One evening, as Cale walked through the heart of the city, people moved aside without knowing why. Some shivered as his golden eyes caught the light, though he offered only a faint smile. He was becoming a legend, half myth, half guardian. Mothers told their children that if they strayed too far into danger, the Wolfborn would find them. Street gangs told stories of the boy who could summon wolves from shadows. Yet Cale knew the truth. He was no myth. He bled, he faltered, he feared. And still, he stood. Atop the rooftops, the wolves howled in chorus. Kyle lifted his head and joined them, his voice carrying across steel and stone. It was a sound of warning, of unity, of defiance against the forces that would come again. The city, once blind to the unseen war in its veins, now had a protector who would never abandon it. As the final echoes faded, his father's voice rumbled in his mind. Your legacy has begun. But remember, every protector is tested. The greatest trial always lies ahead. Kyle gazed across the glowing skyline, heart steady, eyes burning gold beneath the moon. The Wolfborn had risen. The Defender had claimed his place. And the story was only beginning.